Hi, I'm Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge and welcome to one simple tool for treating insomnia. How to kickstart the sleep process and shift clients' insomnia quickly and permanently. And most of us sometimes struggle with wakefulness when we'd rather be asleep. And if it's only now and then we can kind of adapt to it and it's not too injurious to our lives. But if even just 1 or 2 nights of poor sleep can make us feel fatigued and irritable and emotional and unable to concentrate, what happens when a poor sleep pattern continues for days, weeks, or even months? Long-term sleep deprivation can increase our risk of workplace accidents, damage our heart and lung function, reduce our threshold for hallucination, reduce our immune function, cause or exacerbate mental illnesses, and maybe even precipitate weight gain and type 2 diabetes. So you get the idea, sleep is vital. So helping people to experience the astonishing healing power of deep and restorative sleep can change their lives in all kinds of wonderful ways. We all need to know about sleep. Maintaining a healthy sleep pattern gives us a solid base from which to learn, enjoy, and develop in life. And for your clients, re-engaging the super balm of natural nourishment that is good sleep can go a long way towards overcoming their demons. Trying to do therapy or coaching with someone who's not getting enough sound sleep can be like working with your hands tied. Now, I've spoken before and written before about attending to good sleep hygiene, inviting sleep in and having a good wind down routine, making it welcome by behaving in ways that encourage healthy sleep to visit you, so to speak. But here I want to show you how you can kickstart the sleep process to make it easier to actually fall asleep in the first place. Now, 30 years ago, I had an old car, and I don't mean a classic old car. I mean the sort of rusted, status-lowering jalopy that turned heads for all the wrong reasons. But it wasn't its appearance that bothered me, although that didn't really do much for my sense of status. But this car had functional issues as well. Something about something to do with something in the engine meant that I always had to park facing downhill. Okay, if I wanted my passion wagon, which in fact was the opposite, to actually start, flat surfaces just wouldn't cut it, And I should have moved to San Francisco. Mind you, once the metallic Babe magnet got going, it ran like a dream, but it just had difficulty to start, As long as I worked with gravity to give it the kickstart it needed to actually get going, it did the job. So why am I segueing into my past vehicular embarrassments? Well, people often assume that to go to sleep, the mind needs to become still. But actually, in the initial stages of sleep, the mind becomes more active, just active in a different way. And just as I was able to kickstart my old maimed motor with the help of gravity, so too we can kickstart the process of falling asleep. We just need to understand how the process works. If we think about our language, we fall in love, we fall asleep. And women, to use an old term, fall pregnant. So the point is, there are many areas of life we can't force. We have to let happen. But we can't force sleep. We can't force love or force pregnancy, much of the time anyway. Some things just have to happen by themselves. Okay, I certainly couldn't force my car to start on a flat surface. Though of course there's an element of letting them happen. So in these areas of life, and when treating insomnia, we have to help the control freakery of the conscious mind butt out, move aside for a while, so that the necessary unconscious processes can begin to occur. Recommending that someone try to get some sleep is tantamount to telling them to try to fall in love with the first person they see. We fall, we don't force. And funnily enough, people sometimes actually report a sensation of falling during the early stages of sleep. These sudden movements are similar to the jump we make when we're startled by something, something makes you jump. But there's more to sleep than just falling. Sleep is not a single, uniform entity. Up until the 1950s, we believed sleep was a purely passive part of our daily or nightly lives. But we now know that during sleep, our brains are very active. In a typical night, we travel through stages 1, 2, 3, and finally 4, which is deep restorative sleep, with REM or dream sleep interspersed throughout those numbers. For a physically and mentally healthy adult, REM sleep accounts for around 20% of the sleep time. But here's the important thing. When people are awakened during the initial stages of falling asleep, leading into stage 1 of sleep, they often report having experienced flashes of dream fragments. So we don't start having full dreams straight off, but we do seem to go through a stage of tiny little dream scenarios before we begin to relax into deeper sleep. So almost like going through a little meteor shower of dreams before we go into the deep space of deep sleep. And it's not until around 70 to 90 minutes into your sleep that most people have their first full proper dream. But these tiny flashes of dreams start to happen as soon as we tip from full consciousness into the initial meandering pathways of slumber. So these fragments of REM-like experiences invariably occur on the way into sleep as the unconscious mind takes over from conscious thinking or worrying. And this is a process that needs to be allowed to happen. But how can this help us kickstart the process of falling asleep? So as a kid, I was sometimes told to count sheep if I couldn't fall asleep. Now, the idea was that counting imaginary sheep would become so dull that I'd fall asleep through boredom. But as it turns out, the idea itself wasn't so bad, but the logic behind it was all wrong. It wasn't the boredom that lifted me towards sleep, it was the act of visualization itself. By imagining sheep or anything else, non-emotive, we mirror what starts to happen as we fall asleep. We're purposefully producing these dream fragments. As we drift or fall, choose your metaphor, asleep, we have rapid, often quite bizarre visualizations, even if you're not consciously aware of them or don't remember them afterwards, and other imagined sensory episodes. So this is effectively a naturally occurring hypnotic trance state. And here's the exciting bit. When we teach people to self-hypnotize, we're also teaching them to enter the initial stages of sleep voluntarily. Hypnosis mirrors what happens during REM sleep or dream sleep. The imagination is activated purposefully through self-hypnosis, but then is left to run itself as we allow ourselves to fall asleep. Many clients who listen to our hypnosis downloads tell us that they often fall asleep if they listen to them at bedtime. And this doesn't surprise me one bit, because partly they're relaxing and calming, but hypnosis mirrors the natural process of falling asleep so well that if a person is already tired, of course, then sleep becomes irresistible. This happens so commonly that sometimes I find I even need to recommend that people use hypnosis at other times of day to make sure they don't fall asleep. So here are a couple of ways to activate the imagination in order to kickstart the REM state, which is the first step to hypnagogically entering the gateways of sleep itself. So technique number 1, take away the pressure to mimic nature. So sometimes people worry they can't visualize, even though they often report having visualized during dreaming. So what I guess they mean is that they can't seem to visualize voluntarily, to order, on demand. And I don't blame them. While the conscious mind can help us begin the process of visualization, it's no expert when it comes to inviting in dream scenarios. But fortunately, it doesn't need to be. During early sleep onset, we don't tend to have really extended dream scenarios, but rather very rapid flashes of imagery. Imagine I ask you to close your eyes and just get a very rough approximation of, say, a blue circle. And you could probably for a split second at least, to get some sense of what a blue circle looks like. You can even do that right now if you're not driving a car or operating heavy machinery. Okay, so close your eyes and just get, just for a nanosecond, the reality of a blue circle. And it's that easy to start to kickstart the initial phases of sleep. Just keep getting really quick approximations of different imagery. It doesn't need to be some deep inner hypnotic experience or full movie effects or anything like that. Just what the surface of water might look like for half a second. Okay, or the moon might look like, or something like this. Just quick flashes here and there to begin to encourage the natural falling into sleep. One client came to me having suffered years of late sleep onset, and like so many others, when I mentioned visualization, the walls went up as he protested that he couldn't visualize. I can't visualize, even though he told me about dreams in which he'd seen things. So we started simple. I asked him to imagine the blue circle, and I said, not even for half a second do I want you to imagine that. And it wasn't long before it became a nightly routine for him to go through all the colours and shapes he could think of. And he soon found that he also experienced touching and even smelling these shapes as he tipped into sleep onset. Okay, because we don't just dream visually, we can feel things and we can touch things and smell things and taste things multisensorily in dreams. But I like to get a little more creative as well. So personally, I find that if I begin to visualize really bizarre images, I fall asleep sooner than if I stick to simple shapes and colors. So I might for a second imagine penguins wearing straw boater hats, or flying in formation over the moon, or some other such impossible nonsense. And why do I do that? Because people often report quite bizarre imagery when they're naturally falling asleep, when they're having these dream fragments. So it makes sense, at least to me, that the more closely we can approximate this natural, bizarre nature of these images, the more effectively we can encourage the psychology of sleep and therefore the physiology of slumber. So keep it simple and quick, especially if the conscious initiation of imagery is new to you or your clients. But you can also make the imagined dream flashes as bizarre or impossible as you like. The crazier the better, as this seems to be the best way to mirror the irrational dream imagery people have at this stage. But as the skill of purposefully using REM states improves, we can take it further to kickstart the initial phases of sleep. So technique number 2, begin the journey. Now the metaphor of a journey is pretty apt when it comes to sleep, and we could teach people simple hypnotic journeys to follow in their minds. These could be actual journeys that they're familiar with, as long as all emotional connotations with that journey are fine, or they could be imaginary journeys, such as following steps into a beautiful fantasy garden. If a person's concentration becomes diverted, perhaps by conscious worries or analysis, they can simply start the imaginary journey over, or revert to the kind of flash imagery that I was talking about before. Now, as an aside, surfing the net or watching YouTube clips or exciting movies doesn't encourage sleep onset before we go to bed. Quite the opposite. The rapid fire external imagery can actually have a stimulating sleep shunning effect. On the other hand, reading a novel, an absorbing book, before sleep, which encourages the internal generation of imagery at your own pace, can be wonderfully soporific and begin to encourage that dream fragment stage of sleep that we're after. And of course, worries need to be dealt with and left outside the bedroom door. And a sensible sleep encouraging protocol needs to be followed if we are to maintain sleep once we've drifted into it. But the takeaways here are that firstly, we fall asleep. We don't force a sleep. We let sleep happen. We encourage sleep to visit us by being welcoming to it. Sleep isn't a passive state, but has its own unique activity patterns in the brain. The brain doesn't just switch off so much as switch over to a different way of functioning. As we're first entering light sleep, we often experience flashes of dream fragments, and we can kickstart that process through the conscious use of visualization and other imaginary scenario experiences. We can teach people to self-hypnotize, but we can also simply encourage the use of purposeful flash imagery to mirror sleep onset dream fragments. Sleep can be a gentle palliative, it can be life-enhancing, even life-saving. And we need to value and prioritize this wonderful part of nature, not by forcing it, but by letting ourselves drop into its life-affirming palm as it nourishes and heals and soothes and comforts us, and so lifts us up. So I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe. And if you want to hear when my next video is published, hit the notification bell below. I'm Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and if you'd like to subscribe to my email newsletter, you can find it over at unk.com/blog. That's unk.com/blog. And thanks for watching.